Cool. Okay, so this is a question, and this, this is one of those questions you sort of like. I don't know if I how I should ask or how I should ask it, but I think it would come up in people's minds that when we talk about the conservative groups on the kind of far right side of the spectrum, often we associate them with racism. We
Mhm.
associate them with white nationalism or even neo-Nazism on the extreme right version. So my question for you is, being a person of color in that space, do you find that you have to um, maneuver around that element within, especially within the gun culture? What's that like for you, both in terms of your strategy to do conflict resolution, but also I'm interested in how you as a person process that. Like, what's that like for your soul?
That is an outstanding question. Good one. Kudos. So navigating it, and actually, I had a conversation with someone not too long ago where they asked me something very similar. Um, and what what I came up with was that a lot of people ask, like, "Man, you must never get to be you." Uh, in those situations. And it was like, no, I like being black in this country. I've learned the code switch. It's not wearing, I don't wear a mask, but I do know how to code switch. And I'm actively doing that constantly throughout the day because that's a way, it's just, it's a way to, it's necessary to survive in this world, for me at least, to code switch. And so in the gun community and the conservative community, definitely there's a lot of racism, and but that's everywhere for me is experiencing racism. It's just because I've experienced it in the left. When I moved to Oregon, my family's from the South, so when I moved to Oregon, it was a very frustrating experience because, and Ryan, you've heard me say this before. I call it low fat, low cal racism, where like it's very passive and it's very, liberals think, a lot of times liberals will say these things that they believe are compliments and things like that. And it's really, it's not aggressive, it's not overt racism, but it is a racist comment in a lot of ways, or it's problematic at the very least. Uh, and I prefer my racism full fat. Like I want to know what I'm dealing with, and that's one thing that I appreciate is that I don't know if I appreciate it, but it's one thing I prefer is when if someone has a problem with me because of my race, I like to know right up front. I like to know what I'm dealing with, so I don't have to have this underlying because that's a very stressful thing. Being black is having this underlying uh, idea of what someone really thinks about you and what they say about you when you leave the room, and that's a very aggravating, frustrating thing to have to navigate with. And so a lot of times in the especially in the gun world, if I encounter some sorts of racism, it's pretty outward and it's pretty overt. And I know exactly what I'm dealing with and who I'm dealing with. And, like, all right, that guy's a problem, or this group's a problem, or, yep, won't be going back to that kind of event. Uh, but it is frustrating and it's taxing. And I use my experience as a mediator in conjunction with that. And a lot of times I develop these really unique, weird connections with people you would never think, and not like long term meaningful, but just temporary. I went to a buddy's bachelor party years ago, and it was a friend of a friend. It was my friend's bachelor party. I was invited to. I get there, and I can see them kind of whispering in the corner, and they're the guy whose party we're at is like freaking out because when as soon as we walked in, I'm like, uh-oh. I knew it was about me. And sure enough, two outwardly, overtly dressed skinheads walk in. And I mean, they've got the bomber jacket, shaved head, Doc Martin boots. And my buddy comes up to me, he's like, dude, I'm so sorry. He knows them and he's not part of that group and this and that. He made all the excuses. And I'm just like, it ain't bothering me. I'm not bothering them. And so we made our way to the drink table at the same time. And I kind of wanted this interaction because I like collecting stories. And I could tell he was waiting for me to react to his appearance. He was waiting for me to give him something to push back against and fight against. And I don't even remember how the conversation started, but we actually wound up in a conversation and talking. And uh, he was just like, huh. And this is one of the weirdest conversations I've ever had because, we're going back and forth, we're giving each other all kinds of grief. And he was like, yeah, and I finally get to the point where I ask him, like, dude, what, why? I was like, you actually seem like a pretty cool guy. Why would you? And he was like, dude, I just like belonging. And so I gave him the space to kind of open up. And this is what I do with mediation. It's what I do in my personal life, especially being Black and navigating the communities that I'm in, is give people the opportunity to tell them something, tell you something about them. Give them the opportunity to talk and, work through some things or just communicate without judgment, without like making them feel bad or shaming or blaming them. And he was just like, I like belonging. And I could tell he had a little shame around it. He's like, I like belonging. And yeah, it's not the most ideal group, but they accept me and they made me feel good about who I am. And I was just like, all right, want to get another drink? And he was like, yeah. And we went and we had, more drinks. And it was just like, and now his buddy that came with him, the other one was not receptive to it. And I read that and I was like, all right, cool. Like I'm having a conversation with the neo-Nazi. Like this is a good story. I'm gonna be able to take this somewhere in life. But it's that kind of mindset walking around. Like I get it is angering, it is upsetting to see. When you see it initially, it's upsetting. Or when you hear, someone in a group that you think you're vibing with, and you hear that one racist thing, and everybody kind of laughs or goes along with it. And it's just like, there it is. Okay, all right, yeah. And it's just kind of deflating and it's frustrating. And so, I just choose. I acknowledge that that's there, and that's definitely a stress that I deal with, but also choose not to let it affect me. I choose not to let it drag me down because otherwise that would be 90% of my day throughout the week is just being dragged down by these microaggressions and macroaggressions that come out of left field every other hour. And so yeah, it's just about I compartmentalize my anger and my frustration. So I pick and choose what I get mad about. Like when my favorite person on Chop doesn't get picked, I let myself legitimate. Or if I lose a match in Call of Duty, I legitimately get mad at that because that's it's ridiculous, and it's something I can just pour all that anger and frustration into. But it doesn't mean anything, and it goes away, and it's just off into the wind, and then I can go about my day. So